Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your home for all things related to helping you on your journey to find that amazing job. Each episode I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, graduate recruiters and career coaches who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute-ish show. Put simply, this is a show I wish I had when I graduated. And a warm welcome to the 91st episode of the Graduate Job Podcast, where this week we get niche and dive into getting a graduate job in the field of quality and regulatory affairs. I'm joined today by regulatory affairs expert Karandeep Badwal as we explore just exactly what quality and regulatory affairs is and why it is such a booming area for graduates. In this episode, aside from me repeatedly stumbling over the phrase regulatory affairs, we discuss the key skills you need to thrive in this area of work, why work experience is so crucial to starting your career, and the things you need to be doing now to get noticed and get your first role. No matter if you are already set on getting into regulatory affairs or if you have never heard of the area before, this is an episode you should listen to as we explore topics such as how to use LinkedIn effectively, how to send effective cold emails, and how to get noticed through volunteering and work experience, which are relevant no matter what industry you're applying to. The only link you need to remember today is graduatejobpodcast.com/regulatory affairs, which has a full transcript you can download and also links to everything we discuss. Before we start though, let me tell you about the brilliant course I'm working on, which is cunningly titled How to Get a Graduate Job. This course is packed with decades of experience into one step-by-step guide of everything you need to do to get a graduate job. There are videos, there's guides, there's handouts, there's help with CVs, applications, video interviews. Look, if you need to know it to get a graduate job, it's in the course. It's going live at the end of August, but to be the first to hear about it and to get it at a never-to-be-repeated price with special bonuses, head on over to graduatejobpodcast.com/course and leave me your email. Right, on with the show. A very warm welcome to my guest today, Quality and Regulatory Affairs expert in the medical affairs industry, Karandeep Badwal. Karandeep, welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Hi James, thank you for having me on.
And today we're going to explore how to get a graduate job in the field of regulatory affairs. So before we explore what exactly regulatory affairs is, do you want to maybe introduce yourself properly and give the listeners a little bit of an introduction to yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so basically I work in quality and regulatory affairs within the medical devices industry. To put simple in layman terms, that's to do with the registration and the overall safety of the device to make sure that throughout the life cycle and also prior to the device going to the market that all the data is there to show that it's safe and it's effective to do what it actually can do. And also the follow-up with that if anything goes wrong with the device, reporting it, etc. Just dealing with that sort of stuff really.
Oh, brilliant. And I have to hold my hands up to the complete ignorance of what sort of the field of regulatory affairs was. I was had to get on Wikipedia and find out a bit more about it. I mean, how big a field is it? I mean, are there loads of jobs in this area or?
It's a strange one, really. So if you looked into the medical devices industry, it's not the sort of first job that would come to mind, but it is one of those industries that when you go in and join it, you just realize how huge it is. I mean, every single medical device company out there has some sort of quality or regulatory department. Every sort of medical device out there goes wrong from time to time, and you need these individuals. So much so that now there are professional organizations out there, and they're now even offering master's degrees within regulatory affairs itself, which just goes to show how much of a growing industry it is. And as you know, as the future goes on, more and more regulations are coming in, more directives, government's getting a lot more stricter in terms of medical products due to their safety. So this is a growing industry at the moment.
Yeah, and Wikipedia handily told me that the main areas for it, you mentioned medical devices, pharmaceuticals, veterinary, pesticides, agrochemicals, cosmetics, complementary medicines. So yeah, it's the whole overall area of regulatory affairs. I'm going to stumble over that as we go, as I keep repeating it every episode. is a big number of industries there that where these roles are.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. My first role started in the food supplements, vitamins, minerals, etc. That's where my first role was, in regulatory affairs, and before I switched into the medical devices industry. So it's not uncommon to find individuals from the pharmaceutical to medical devices, vice versa. And even a more niche industry that I've seen recently are dual devices. So they have a medical device aspect to it and also a pharmaceutical device part to it, i.e. it may administrate a drug. And that's quite a niche up and coming market at the moment.
So before we maybe get into the topic of regulatory affairs in medical industry, a little bit more about your background. So you mentioned there's a master's, you can do it now. I mean, what did you study at university, and how did you get into it yourself?
So I'll tell you where I started off. So my background is actually within pharmaceuticals. I firstly started a bachelor's in pharmaceutical and cosmetic science. Once I did that, I decided that, I was quite interested in the quality and the regulatory part of it. And as a master's, I did a degree in pharmaceutical quality by design, because that was the closest thing that I could find. When I came out of university, I looked at the pharmaceutical world and I wasn't very impressed by it, quite frankly. Your product can take 3 to 5 years of clinical trials before it hits the market. Then I came across medical devices and I was quite impressed to see that, you could build this device, get some clinical data and the flexibility that was offered. And I was sort of drawn towards the medical devices. Unfortunately, with regulatory affairs, as so many graduates out there will probably find, it's a very difficult industry to get into as soon as you leave university. So the first role, I took it on within the food supplements industry, building my experience from there and successfully transitioned into medical devices. However, now, when I graduated 5 years ago, that option wasn't necessarily there. You can now do a master's within regulatory affairs. So if you're 100% decided that this is what you want to do, you go out and do that master's degree. I would highly recommend that to make yourself stand out.
And is it lots of places do the masters, or just one or two universities?
So the only one that I've been aware of is there's a professional organisation called TOPRA. So the organisations for professionals in regulatory affairs, they often do accredited courses and they introduce a master's within regulatory affairs. So this is a company who specialises within regulatory affairs. It's full of professionals, spokespeople. Many people in the industry with the experience have come together and decided to create this master's course based around that.
Oh, brilliant. I was actually having a dig on their website earlier, Topra. So you mentioned that it's an industry that's very difficult to get into straight from university. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, to get into quality and regulatory, it's very sensitive. You're basically dealing with people's lives. That's the best way to put it. You need to make sure that you've done your risk assessments properly and your product is not going to hurt anybody. Now, not many people out there are going to give that kind of role to somebody who doesn't have any experience or somebody who's just come out of university. You need some sort of experience to show that, you can do your job properly, you can do it very safely before they come into that. So it's just that aspect of danger when it comes to quality and regulatory. They don't want to give it to someone straight away. They much prefer to have someone who's got a bit of experience within the field. And that's the primary reason why.
And what sort of skills do you think people need to go into this industry?
I say the key skill here is self-discipline. As it comes with quality and regulatory roles, it's not really a case of somebody gives you a task, it's a piece of paper, steps 1 to 5, and you do it. It's very open. There's a lot of grey area there. So you need a lot of self-discipline within yourself to get the actual job done, because as is with a lot of quality and regulatory roles, they tend to be quite autonomous. I mean, you may have a manager, but they will just set you a task and you're on your own to do it. So you need that self-discipline within yourself to manage your time properly and get the job done. So I'll say that's the key skill.
And you mentioned you studied at university. I mean, what are there any particular degrees that are better than others then for going into this field, or does it not really matter if you're then going to go on and do the master's degree anyway?
I say it's not necessarily you have to have that master's degree within regulatory to get the job. It would benefit you, but it depends. So decide what industry you want to go into. So personally with me, I started studying in the pharmaceuticals. I decided to go into medical devices. If I could go back in time, I probably would have done a degree in sort of medical science or biomedical science. But as long as you have a sort of good scientific degree, it's not something to worry about too much whatsoever, because when you do a degree, all you're basically saying is that you had the discipline to study for 3 years and gain a baseline knowledge in the scientific industry. So it's not necessary that you have to get a specific degree. It would benefit you, but anything in the scientific field would help get you into this industry.
And In terms then of the jobs themselves, do many companies offer specific graduate jobs in this field, or is it more, a niche and, you're applying for specific roles?
It's a rarity to actually find sort of graduate positions or graduate schemes in quality and regulatory affairs. However, that's not to say companies out there aren't doing it. When I found out when I went into the industry, you do occasionally come across companies who bring on graduates, but that's often done through word of mouth or somebody that they've known, or they're teamed up with a certain university. So they're not necessarily going out there and advertising those roles. And how I've always said to graduates is find a list of companies that you would like to work for in the specific industry within quality and regulatory, whether that be pharma, healthcare, medical devices, etc., and just contact them directly. Explain to them, hi, I'm a student, this is what I've studied, I would like to get into regulatory affairs, state your reasons why, and contact them. And personally, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the companies turns around and says, sure, we'll bring you in for work experience, or actually we're looking for a student in this company. So that's the best way to do it, is you need to cold approach these companies. They're not actively advertising these roles.
No, that's definitely makes sense. And work experience is something that's just so crucial to get, no matter what you're going into. But it's definitely in this quality and regulatory affairs field. Is if you've got that work experience in your CV, then it will stand you in good stead when you do get around to applying for jobs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
So, cold approaches can be more difficult. What would you recommend to listeners who are going to make a cold approach then to really stand out when they do send that initial letter in?
The best way to make yourself stand out, and it's a tool that I use a lot, and a lot of people on your show have already mentioned it, is LinkedIn. That is something that's going to push you forward, because if I ever get an application in from somebody, I'm going to go online and to see what their presence is. I'm not interested in sort of Facebook or Instagram. I'm just looking at the professional experience. I would go onto LinkedIn and see who this individual is. Now, if you're a student, and I've spoken to many students about this, they say, oh, well, I don't have any working experience. What's the point in making a LinkedIn page? And that's where they're making the mistake. So what I say to these individuals is go out there and make a LinkedIn page. Put down what you're studying, and you can just describe in your LinkedIn profile saying, hi, I'm a student studying this course within my first, second or third year. My ambitions is to get into regulatory affairs. Put that in your description. Connect with as many individuals within the field or within the chosen company that you would like to work in, and contact them via LinkedIn, because if you contact them via LinkedIn, they're going to click onto your profile and they're going to read it and they're going to say, okay, this student here is going to be ready in maybe a year's time. I considered bringing on a student, and you can send them a message back saying, yeah, we're looking to take you on. If you are just to email or send a letter, there's no sort of backing and there's no sort of extra sort of wording or anything like that to sort of say who you are as an individual. LinkedIn provides that for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is such a powerful tool. You think before LinkedIn, it was just so much more difficult to get in touch with people. But now you can go on and you can send get the 1 month free trial for email, and you can drop anyone a note, and you can connect with anyone. It's just so easy to do. Are there any particular LinkedIn groups that you'd recommend for regulatory affairs?
So what I say is, one thing I need to point out is on 26th of May 2020, the medical devices industry is going to go through a big change. So we have this new thing called the MDR, the Medical Device Regulation. Previously, we used to follow something called the Medical Device Directive. And as of the 26th of May 2020, there's going to be a lot more stricter rules out there to get your medical devices on the market, and also devices that are currently already on the market. Now, that is an extremely hot topic. LinkedIn is absolutely littered with groups based around MDR and medical devices. There's so many out there. There's big discussions going on. As is with this regulation, there's a lot of grey area, and some people aren't necessarily sure whether their product will be compliant or not, because it's not so black and white. It has a lot of suggestions in there which aren't necessarily very clear. As a result of this, there's been a big increase in demand for people working in that industry, quality and regulatory. So as a student, what I say to you is go out and join as many LinkedIn medical device and MDR based groups that they are. Study the MDR inside out and get yourself some inside knowledge. Companies out there need as much help as they can. And I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to bring on students on internships, even just from an admin point of view, just to help them out, so the managers or the consultants can solely focus on this new regulation that's coming in. So these companies do need a hand out there. And I do say this is probably the best time for students to start considering getting hired within this industry or getting yourself some sort of work experience.
Perfect, listeners. Now is the time to seize the moment then and to get involved in that. So you mentioned that's May. How long will that be going on for then? Do you think it'll take for the new regulations and things to settle in? Is this going to be sort of an ongoing area of work?
It's a hard deadline, so there was a 2-year transition period for people to get their act together. And unfortunately, what I've seen in my experience is a lot of companies have just sort of sat and waited until the last minute, and they've just started to begin that panic period right now. And the amount of contract roles that are out there for quality and regulatory is ridiculous. Companies are getting audited and beginning to realize that they're not going to be compliant by the deadline, and there's sort of a lot of panic going on in the industry at the moment. I can only see that increasing. In my experience, I've seen a lot of companies out there who aren't willing to invest within quality and regulatory affairs. And unfortunately, they're going to find out the hard way when an audit comes through and they found out to be non-compliant. They unfortunately will have to pull their products on the market.
Which will be an expensive thing to do. So, you can see where they'll be getting people involved to help. We mentioned on LinkedIn, and I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you're very active on LinkedIn. You must have a lot of people contacting you. Any advice for people who are making a sort of cold connection on LinkedIn? Any advice for how they can make that effective?
It's funny you actually mentioned that. I was talking with a colleague of mine about how many messages we get. And unfortunately, a lot of the messages that I get from students or even experienced individuals who want to get in the industry, it's just simply a line saying, "Hi, can you please find me a job in this industry?" And then you just sort of sit there blankly like, okay, but what am I to do about that? The best way to approach somebody in this industry is show them that you put the work in there. So if a student message me saying, "Hi, Karen Deep, I'm a student, I've studied this degree, I want to get within regulatory affairs, this is the groups that I've joined, these are the people that I've approached, can you please help me with this?" Then I can see that that individual has put a lot of effort into something, and then I can offer them advice. If you simply say to me, "I'm looking for a job," I can't offer you much. You need to explain to me what your situation is, what specific advice that you're looking for, and where you actually need help. And that's the best way of approaching people, is show them that you've put some work in there. Show them that they've done that the best that you can. And if you've hit a brick wall and you need my advice, then by all means, I will invest the time with you. But if you're just going to send me a message saying, "Please find me a job," I can't help you, simply put.
No, you completely agree with that. And it's one, at least if they put a message, it's one step up from the people who just try and connect to you don't know, who just go for the standard LinkedIn thing of, "Please add me to your network," without putting a message at all.
Yeah, that's the best way of approaching it. So anybody who's ever contacted me in the past, even if it's taken me a couple of weeks to get back to them and has explained their situation, I've always come back to them with the best advice that I could. When it comes to individuals sending me, "Please find me a job," I've always asked back and say, "Please describe your situation," and etc. And often they won't get back to you. So yeah, that's their loss, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we touched upon networking there. Any other networking tips you'd give to listeners who want to get into the field?
What I say is, when it comes to networking, a lot of people get very one-minded. So they start to say, "Okay, I want to go into regulatory affairs. I'm only going to connect with regulatory people." That's completely wrong. Every company is built from an organization. There's people who work in research and development. There's people who work in new product development, etc. You want to connect with as many individuals as possible. So just because that person doesn't necessarily work in regulatory, they work with a colleague who is in that field. And once you expand your mindset and you start connecting with more people in the industry and have a wider network, you'll find more opportunities start coming your way, rather than just connecting people in that one specific job that you want to do, basically.
Yeah, it's you never know who people know when you start connecting with them, and being broad definitely does have its benefits. You never know who people might put you in touch with, and just where those connections will go from there.
Yeah, completely agreed. And another one is, we go back to TOPRA. Now, TOPRA often have many events, showcases, etc. But the biggest one is they have something called an annual symposium. It's usually held somewhere in Europe, not sure where. It changes every year. But that symposium is the best place to go, because in there you've got experienced individuals with sort of 30 years experience, 40 years, 50 years, etc. People who are part of TOPRA on the advisory board. If you go there as a graduate or somebody who wants to get into that industry, you are basically rubbing shoulders with the movers and shakers within that field. If you go to that show, you've shown that you put in effort, that you're very keen to get into that industry, and you speak to the hundreds of people that are out there, it's inevitable at least one of them is going to throw something your way, whether that be an internship, a graduate scheme, etc. So that is something that you can do to make yourself stand out, because many graduates shy away from events like this to say, oh, well, I'm not very experienced, I won't have much input, therefore I won't go. If you went as a graduate, I can probably count on one hand how many graduates probably turn up to these events. You seriously will stand out, and I highly recommend you go to that.
Yeah, no, sounds brilliant advice. And even if there's a cost involved, it will be the cost will pay itself back many, many times over, just with the connections you make, the offers you'll get for internships or work experience or jobs. And as you said, nobody else is going to do it. So when you look at things like that and you think, okay, there's cost and there's effort involved, it's going to put people off. That should be a really good thing, because then it means that you're going to be in a crowd of one. So you're going to really, really stand out.
It'd be one of the best investments you make. I mean, your return on investment would be crazy if you found yourself a role there.
Mm-hmm. Thinking more widely then about getting information in the area, are there any YouTube channels or podcasts that you'd point listeners towards?
Yes, so I've actually featured on one. It's called the Easy Medical Device Podcast. It's run by Manya Alazi. He's very keen on this industry, and he's made a lot of videos with professionals in there. And if you went through that whole YouTube series of how he releases it, you would have a very good understanding of what quality and regulatory affairs actually is. Because before then, the only way that you will find out what this was about was experience or talking through professionals within the field. By the release of his podcast, he's now made that information public, and individuals who previously necessarily didn't have a lot of knowledge within quality and regulatory affairs can now go on to there and learn a lot about it. So I highly recommend that. Excellent.
And listeners, all the links and a full transcript of everything that we discussed today will be over in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/regulatory affairs. Okay, Karandeep. Thinking then around sort of work experience and volunteering. How important is, say, volunteering and work experience in getting that final job offer?
Work experience is everything. I mean, experience is king. You can have all the degrees and qualifications in the world, which shows that you have theoretical knowledge, but work experience shows that you've actually gone out there and applied it. And the way that I see it, if I saw somebody with a 10-year degree with 1 year's experience, but somebody with no degree and 9 years experience, I would take the person with 9 years experience, because they've demonstrated to me that they've been able to do the job properly, basically. So when it comes to work experience, is go out there and get as much relevant work experience as you can within the industry you want to go to. So if it's quality and regulatory affairs and you can't necessarily get experience within that, that's fine. Join a scientific or a medical company. Even if it's just working on the sales team, you will come across quality and regulatory staff. You can interact with them, you can talk with them, and you can learn the skills within that field. So don't necessarily think that it has to be within quality and regulatory. If it's in a medical company, you can still interact with quality and regulatory professionals within there. And volunteering, that's another brilliant thing that you can do. So of course, when it comes to work, you've just left university, money may be a problem with a lot of people, but don't be afraid to go out and just volunteer for a couple of weeks. If you say to a company saying, hi, I want to come here, teach me what you know, and I'll work for you for free, that 2 weeks experience or however many weeks experience you get will be invaluable, because it'll make you stand out amongst the crowd as an individual. Topra as well, so I know we keep going back to them, they also take on student volunteers. That's something to maybe help you stand out. And also, if you are going to visit their symposium and you're a student volunteer there, you already know a few people, so a lot of people can put you in connection with the right individuals rather than you just turning up as a stranger. So even if you can't get work experience or paid work experience, I highly recommend that you see if you can go for the volunteering route within a relevant company.
That's quality advice there. And you must have seen lots of work experience people over the years where you've been working. Any advice for how they can stand out when they do get that work placement and they're on site, how they can make the most of it and impress?
Show that you're keen to learn. What I found with a lot of work experience individuals is the manager or I will say to them, these are the tasks that you need to do, and they go out and do them, and they do a brilliant job, but they're not very keen on learning. So if an individual comes up to me and says, hi Karandeep, you've asked me to do this for you, could you please explain what this standard, this regulation means? I'll be impressed with that individual. I'll sit down with them, I'll explain what it actually means. And that's what I found is they'll get on with the job, they'll do a fantastic job, but they don't understand how it works in the background. So show that you're keen to learn, show that you want to get into this field. And then I'll always remember you as that individual who came up to me and asked me for my advice. It's inevitable we'll bump into each other a few years down the line, and if I know of a role going on somewhere, I'd highly recommend that individual over somebody who just sort of turned up, did 2 years work experience and then just walked away basically.
That's great advice. And yeah, you do it's a sort of active and passive thing. You do get lots of students come along who are very passive. They're not asking for additional work. They're waiting for people to give them things. And when you do get people who are just a bit more active in being proactive and asking questions, they stand out so much more than other people. So yeah, it's definitely one of the ways to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all to do with the mindset. If you show that you have the right mindset, it helps you stand out a lot more.
So time is unfortunately running away with us, County. For listeners who are still at university, how can they make the most of university to get them ready for a job in regulatory affairs?
What you need to firstly do is let your lecturers know that you want a job within regulatory affairs. If your lecturers don't know, they can't point you in the right direction. So if you make it clear to your lecturers saying, hi, I enjoy this particular part of the course, I want to get a career within regulatory or quality, and you let them know. With university lecturers, they are one of the most well-connected people because they've taught thousands of students over the years. They've met with industry professionals, they deal with placements, etc. It's almost guaranteed that at least one of them will know somebody in that industry and they can point you in the right direction. So that's the best way. Get a very good relationship with your lecturers, let them know this is the field that you want to go into, and they can start pointing you in the right direction. Of course, the earlier on you tell this, the better off you are.
That's great advice. And any particular societies at university that would stand people in good stead?
So yeah, we look for any sort of scientific or medical societies, etc. One thing I really recommend is not necessarily when you're in university, but when you've left university, is university alumni schemes. With a university alumni scheme, you're in contact with previous professionals. It could be people that are 20 years ahead of you, 15 years ahead of you. And again, like I said earlier, don't discriminate just because they may work in IT or engineering or a different field. They probably got a classmate or a colleague or a friend within the right industry. So that's a brilliant way to connect with more individuals. And that's what it comes to with networking, is keep a very open mind. Don't just think that it has to be people within your network. Go out and connect with as many people as you can, because they might have a friend of a friend of a friend, etc., who works in that field and can point you in the right direction. I mean, I would say 30% of the job leads that I've received in the past have been from people who are not within the medical devices industry. So I know how valuable that can be.
Well, that's a high percentage. So yeah, it just shows the power of networking there. And the alumni search tool on LinkedIn is one of the best tools on there from my perspective. And when you connect people who've been to your university, who especially if they've done the same course as you, it's even though you might not know them, they've got that link with you, and they're very likely to want to help you if you've got that shared background and same course, same place. So yeah, people do like to, especially people further down their career, do like to help people who are just coming up. So do make use of the alumni search tool on LinkedIn. Karen, time is running away with us, so let's maybe move on to our weekly staple questions. So kicking us off, what one book would you suggest that listeners read? I'll leave it open here. It doesn't have to be regulatory affairs related.
It's a book that's been mentioned before, and I'm pretty sure anybody who's into sort of career development has brought it up, and that is What Color Is Your Parachute? Yeah. Reason I say that is because it's a complete mindset change. It moves away from the old model of, find a job online, send your CV and hope for the best. This tells you about the direct approach, how to improve your CV, and overall how to find a career within your field. As what I found is when you start taking that approach of rather just sending out a blanket CV to as many recruiters as you can, but instead sort of giving them a call, tailoring your CV, networking, sending letters to companies out there. By that way, you're guaranteed to get a lot more offers, because unfortunately what I found is a lot of the jobs that are out there are filled internally or without being advertised through word of mouth. So if you're only applying for advertised roles in the old method, you're probably only applying for about 20% of roles within the market, and you're severely limiting yourself.
Brilliant advice, and it is a cracking book. So again, that'll be linked to in the show notes. So check that out over at graduatejobpodcast.com/regulatory affairs. And Karen, what one internet resource would you point listeners towards?
Like I mentioned earlier, TOPRA. So if you want to see what professionals in the field are up to, what's going on within the world of regulatory affairs, where you can find about workshops, seminars, and all the changes in the industry, that is your one-stop shop to go to.
Excellent. And again, that will be linked to in the show notes. And final question, what one tip should listeners implement today to help them on their job search?
Well, I'm a strong believer is that if you miss all the shots that you don't take. So the best way around this is seize all the opportunities that you can that are given to you, take on the extra work, take on the extra roles, as if you don't do that, you will only regret it in the future when you've realized what you could have actually been and what you potentially lost out on.
I love that. That is a great way for us to finish today's show. Karandeep, thank you. What's the best way that people can find out more about you and what you do?
Best way around it is LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I often do videos on there. Sometimes I share articles based around medical devices. So if you want to get a feel as to what's going on in the medical devices world, or even as an individual, you've listened to this podcast and you maybe have a question for me, feel free to connect on LinkedIn and drop me a message.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for appearing on the Graduate Job Podcast today.
Thank you for having me, James.
Many thanks to Karandeep for his time today. I hope that has opened your